All right, guys, let's go ahead and read this next section in our reading essentials, modeling energy in an ecosystem. You learned that energy does not cycle through ecosystems. Instead, energy flows through an ecosystem in one direction. As it flows, organisms might use some energy for life processes. Energy might also be stored in the bodies of organisms as chemical energy, because we know that food is chemical energy. When consumers eat these organisms, the chemical energy moves into the bodies of the consumers. Such a transfer of energy can be from a producer to a consumer. It also can be from one consumer to another consumer. So, for example, that means from a producer to a consumer would be if we've got an herbivore eating a plant, the energy from that plant, which is a producer, is transferred to that consumer, to that deer, for example, or that rabbit. It also can be from a consumer to another consumer. So if one organism eats another. So let's say we have got a lion that eats a snake, for example. Okay. With each transfer of energy, some energy changes to thermal energy. That's important to know. Any extra thermal energy enters the environment from the bodies of consumers. Scientists use models to study this flow of energy through an ecosystem. The model they use depends on how many organisms they are studying. Food chains. Food chain is a model that shows how energy flows in an ecosystem through a feeding relationship. In a food chain, arrows show the transfer of energy. That's so important to understand. So a food chain is shown below. All right, so what we have here is we've got the sun emitting all of this energy. And who's going to use that energy directly are going to be our plants. So the plants make energy-rich food from sunlight through the process of photosynthesis. All right, so the plant is making its own food because it is a producer and for its own use, for its own growth and reproduction and life functions. And it stores the rest of the glucose in its leaves and its fruit and its roots. Okay, so here comes along. We've got this mouse, for example, here. Let's change that color. Let's make that brown. Okay, so the mouse obtains the energy when that mouse eats that plant. So the energy that's stored in the leaves of that plant is transferred to the mouse when the mouse eats that plant. So then when the snake eats this mouse, the energy stored in that mouse is transferred to the snake. And when that hawk eats the snake, the energy is transferred to the hawk. So the arrows indicate transfer of energy. It's not who eats what, it is the transfer of energy from one organism to the next. Food webs. Imagine that you are working on a jigsaw puzzle of a prairie. A food chain is just one piece in that puzzle. It just shows one small part of the prairie. A food chain is like one piece of a ecosystem jigsaw puzzle. It can help you study parts of an ecosystem. It does not show you the whole picture, though. So, for example, if we look up here, we know that this food chain is just showing one feeding relationship. One feeding relationship. We know that more organisms are eating that grass. than just the mouse. We know that the snake is eating more organisms than just the mouse, and the hawk is eating more organisms than just the snake. So a food chain is going to just show you one feeding relationship. But that's not real life, is it? We have a whole bunch of different feeding relationships, and that is a food web. Look again at the food chain. The mouse might also eat the seeds of other producers such as corn or trees. The snake might eat other animals such as frogs, crickets, or earthworms. The hawk might also eat other animals such as mice, squirrels, rabbits, or fish. The feeding relationships in this ecosystem are complex. Scientists use a food web to study these feeding relationships. A food web is a model of energy transfer that shows how food chains in a community are interconnected. A food web is many overlapping food chains. A food web below shows the complex feeding pattern in an ecosystem. Arrows show how energy flows. All right, so let's take a look at that. So it's all going to start down here at the producer level, all right? And so this shows transfer of energy, that we have a couple of different organisms eating on that algae. And then the energy, a couple of different ways that the fish are obtaining their energy. There are a couple of different ways. Let's change that. A couple of different ways that the squid is obtaining its energy. A couple of, different ways, just like so. Okay, this is a food web. Many overlapping food chains. So I'm going to erase this for a second. Okay, so we can see here how there are several food chains. Okay, we have another food chain that could go like this. Bump, 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 bump. Okay, another food chain just like this. And another food chain just like this. Okay, so but a food web are going to be all the different feeding relationships within that ecosystem. Okay, so that's all we're going to read today, and you are going to be filling out in your outline notes just this much right here. Modeling energy in an ecosystem and food webs. All right, because we've got energy pyramids, and that's going to be tomorrow. So make sure you are getting that filled out, and I will talk with you soon.